anyway, here we are. The sun isn't shining as brightly in Los Angeles today, Thursday, July 23rd. That could be it. But you know what? Today's Leader Livecast, by the way, I'm Kim Marshall, co-founder of Swell Public Relations and host of the Global Wellness Summit podcast. But today's Leader Livecast is a little bit different. We're not going to focus so much on COVID, but we're going to focus on a simultaneous crisis that has struck the world, and that would be the social unrest spurred on by ongoing race disparities around the world. You know, in the U.S., the movement is known as Black Lives Matter, but as Robin DiAngelo, the author of the newly repopularized book White Fragility, says, if Black lives did matter enough, that wouldn't have to be said. So today we're talking to Randi-Mae Stanford-Leibold. And Randi is a beautiful, lovely woman who has been a wellness counselor for 10 years. She defines herself as a meditation and mindfulness teacher, author, facilitator, and wellness consultant. You know, she spent 5 years doing crisis counseling. That talk about, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Being forged by fire. So Randi-Mae specializes in meditation and all things wellness. So she lives in Toronto, Canada. Let's see if I can connect here today with Randi-Mae. There she is. Oh, yay. She's so good. Let's see if her lighting is better than mine. We're connecting. Hi, Randi-Mae.
Hi. How are you?
How's Canada today? How's Toronto?
It's actually nice. It's really lovely.
It's lovely.
Yeah, it's really lovely.
Well, I will say we usually have bright light here, but it's a cloudy day in Los Angeles, so sorry I'm a little dimmer today. But anyway, Randy, can I call you Randi-Mae? Is that
That's fine. Yeah.
I shorten all my friends' names, you know. I call my friend Linda Lynn, so forgive me ahead of time. Randi-Mae, would you tell us what sort of work you do? What's your specialty? You can say it better than I can.
Yeah, so one of my specialties is I've been a counselor for the last 10 years. So working with people, working with individuals, couples, organizations. So I've been doing that. And part of it is really the theme in everything that I do, whether it's from like putting on the Mindful Living Barbados conference or it's working with organizations and teaching like an emotional intelligence course or a wellness course. The whole thread is like self-care and well-being. So that whole thread goes from whatever practice I'm doing, whether big or small, that kind of thread goes through everything.
Oh, that's so wonderful. And you know, it's funny because we're talking about the wellness industry, and which sort of was born from spas and luxury lifestyle, that sort of thing. And we always said we need to be more appealing to the masses. We need to make it more, you know, available. But
Right.
The conversation never really was around communities of color enough. And I think on the first call that I met you for the Global Wellness Summit, I think it was a master class, they were just coming clean with it. Like, I'm sorry, but this is a reality. We're going to try to change it. What has been your experience in the wellness world in that regard?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's really important to explore is that is women and people of color have their own wellness community, because for so long we felt like we weren't a part of it. So something as simple as why I created Mindful Living is because I was speaking at a mindfulness event once and I was exhausted of feeling like I wasn't supposed to be there. Like I had someone suggest to me in a very subtle way, but not so subtle, that I didn't fit into that space.
Yeah.
Which I'm glad it happened now, because it propelled me to create my own space, and space that is inclusive.
Yeah.
But part of it is, it's like, you know, when we talk about wellness, we're looking at yoga studios, right? Yoga studios are now, the image of a yoga teacher is changing, right? So we have, like, there's a wellness collective that I'm a part of called Store, where they're all Black yoga instructors.
Wow.
Black Girl in Om with Lauren Ash. And so there's all of these collectives that have created because there hasn't ever been really a safe space for Black women, Black people to engage in wellness practices. And the image of what a woman in wellness looked like, you know, hasn't always been a person of color.
No, I've been there, and I'm telling you, You know, I always think I have freedom of speech, but when you read and listen to the White Fragility book, you're like, no, you don't. But my husband's from Cuba, right? And my sister is on listening. And I said I was going to mention this. We grew up in Motown, where you could see our town on the Motown record label. And
Right.
our city was, there was a line of demarcation, the white side of the city and the black side. And our church split to build a new one, got too big. So we went to the group on the black side of
Yeah.
town. Well, that was fine. That didn't, I remember being like, oh, that's cool. And then all of a sudden, my older brother started dating and got engaged to a black woman.
Right.
And 1971, the family just panicked. And I
Right.
remember thinking, what? And they would always say, what about the children? And then my sister, I'd say a year or two later, started dating a guy from the Bahamas. We had moved to Florida.
Right.
And once again, panic. And she writes in her paper for her college class on gender and race equality or something. She wrote, 20 years later, my sister marries a Cuban and everything's okay. But
Right.
really, it isn't okay, right?
Right. 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 And so that even when we think about families, right? When we talk about race, like when a family gets upset that a black person is coming into their family and someone says, well, what about the children? But it's really, what is the environment that we create for the children to grow in? Right. So it's not so much this whole idea of like, what about the children, but it's like, what's the environment you're creating for those children to be born into?
That's right. And you really got me on the call, the very first call on racial equality with the Global Wellness Summit. You said that in Canada, where you live, they had decided to allocate $10 million for Black mental health or people of color. Is that right?
I don't remember how much money was allocated, but I do know that it was the public health addressed it as a mental health crisis, right? And so recognizing that racism that's happening and being experienced and being shown on the media is impacting people's mental health and well-being.
And one of the questions we always ask on these little live casts is, what could we learn from your experience? You told me, Randi-Mae, what did you do with your practice for, I think, the month of June, the whole month of June? Is that right?
Right. So for my practice, I opened up my practice to offer free counseling to Black people from wherever they are in the Black community, to have free counseling. Because what happens when we watch somebody die on media and it gets replayed and replayed, everybody's experiencing vicarious trauma. And what that symbolizes is that, you know, people talk about Black Lives Matter, but what it really is trying to get the world to understand that Black Lives Matter. And when a Black life is lost on video, that then impacts Black people in the Black community, our community's sense of self, in the sense of, look how easy it is for this person to kill a member of our community. And then, you know, easy it is to kill someone from our community. And now I'm going out into the community wondering if I'm safe. And so I supported, I had over 70 sessions. I supported people from in the States, in Washington, in New York, clients in Tanzania, all over. And the common thread was that everyone was going through is collective grief.
Yep.
We all watched a man die, and a woman, Breonna Taylor, and several people die. And because of this, what is so important that people understand is like, I also did a talk with some students at a university here in Canada. And one of the students had said, it's almost like Black people are alien now. And when he said that, I understood what he was saying, because the idea of when we say Black Lives Matter and the fact that we have to announce this to the world and claim that our lives matter, in this day and age that we're in, you know what I mean? And so it's like, that's why that movement is so important, because we need to be able to stand in spaces, you know, and people need to recognize that, yes, our lives do matter beyond whatever it's been conceived or to be, right? So for example, how does that extend to my day-to-day life?
Right.
Like when I go to teach, I've gone to teach in spaces, in corporate spaces, and people look around like, oh, where's the teacher? Or I get the question of, you know, did you make all of that material yourself? Or when someone says, you know, you have to teach for the whole day. Have you done that before?
Oh my God.
So these are some of the things that I experience. And so I'm grateful that I had to learn to navigate these things, right? But what it does is a lot of Black people that I speak to and I've counseled, we talk about the exhaustion of having to navigate spaces, especially the workspace, right? So this connects to wellness because wellness in the workplace really matters. And wellness in the workplace really matters for people of color because this idea of how I have to navigate, how I wear my hair, how I show up in the space,
Yeah.
This idea of an angry Black woman that a lot of women, Black women, are afraid of being, but it's also, we have a reason to be angry right now, right? So all of that is happening at the same time. And so I hope that, you asked me a question and how does this all connect? These are some of the things that have come up in my practice. Right?
Well, also you put your literal money where your mouth is by opening your service. I mean, to think, this is what happened to me. And I asked my girlfriend, can I share this experience? She is the one I called. She's a health coach. She's a Black woman. And she invited me. We'd gone hiking in LA the weekend. There were curfews, and our curfew was supposed to be 8 p.m. And while we were on the trail, it changed to 6. So there were 2 Latina girls and she and her beautiful daughter, and we all had to hurry and, get to our cars. And I worried about them getting home. And she invited me then a couple of days later to a journaling class. And when I zoomed and turned it on, it was all Black women except me and one other person.
Right.
And when they started to talk about it, all of a sudden, and these were women that I know from a religious, are you moving?
No, someone just came to my door. So I'm going to invite them on in. They're going to say hello to you.
Hello, I'm so sorry. I was at a funeral nearby. It's very far from me, so I figured I'd stop
Randi-Mae. Randi-Mae's popular. You can't help it.
Coming from bad vibes, you want to come with the good vibes, right?
Good vibes. And remember, if you were in LA, we'd be wearing a mask. All of you both would be wearing a mask.
Come on in.
Come on in and listen to us. Anyway, on this journaling class, Randi-Mae, I was so moved because, these were girls I knew from religious organizations where I thought they were Christian, they were, upstanding, fine young citizens, they wouldn't be picked on. I mean, come on, who would ever bother them? And then when they shared their experiences of being pulled over just because of driving while Black or their, professional family members, and then when they had to turn off the camera and sob, and they said they keep hearing George Floyd's voice in their ears and him yelling out for his mother. And I was like, are you kidding? It has affected you too? It was a moment in my life of like, you're an idiot.
Right.
So forgive us for having those moments.
No, and this is part of it that's so important that George Floyd dying impacted us all.
Yeah.
And Breonna Taylor dying impacts us all. And it is a visceral experience of watching somebody's life being taken and having to hear that person call out for their mother. While you watch someone, you can, when a life is lost beneath your body and you're holding them down, you can feel that.
Yep.
And we all watch someone just decide to hold it in their space and just allow someone to call out for their life. And so watching that globally as a Black person, it's like losing somebody. And that's why I mentioned that we experience collective grief.
Yeah. And, I also said that I think when, we have to feel the guilt that we feel, feelings are made to feel, as they say. But when I have noticed because I think a lot of us are scared to say anything or do anything, right? We're going to put our foot in their mouth. We're going to offend someone. We're going to say the wrong thing. But I have seen such an openness in watching sincere white or people not of color apologize for something they've done. Like, remember, was it Amy Cooper and the Harvard grad bird watcher who once in Central Park, that whole story, right? When she called the cops on him. Once they charged her, she lost her job, she lost her dog and everything. He said, enough, that's enough. She doesn't need to suffer anymore. And it's so, I don't know, it's so ready to forgive. And my friend said that maybe it's because the black population is sort of God-fearing in general, if that's too much of a generalization.
I think what happened with the person who is, going out into nature, watching birds, and someone decides, and the fact that somebody knows that they can call the police and say a particular phrase about a black person, and that the police will arrive and question this black person. And so we talk about saying enough that that person has lost their job and their life has changed. But what if that went in a different direction and that man lost his life? What if it went in a different direction and he got arrested and now he has a record and now his whole life changes?
Yep.
Right? So when we talk about, yes, enough is enough, but enough is enough in the fact that that people know, specifically white Americans and white Canadians know that you can say a particular phrase, I feel afraid, or this black person is aggressive, and police will show up and protect them, not even asking the other person a question. And so that is very dangerous territory that we're walking in. And so when we say, yes, black people, we have a spiritual aspect of our culture, and we go into this forgiveness space, but we also have been taught through colonialism that we experience hurt and we have to suffer through it. So this whole idea of yes, we are forgiving people because we have had to endure it for so long, and often when we endure it, there's no consequence to the person who is oppressing us.
That's right. Yeah, often. And I think those conversations need to be had. And if people are listening more now because they're shut down with COVID and the ears are more open because there's not a lot else to do, so be it. So, Randi-Mae, what can another company learn from your experience? What you did during the shutdown, reaching out, listening, you didn't charge for those sessions. So what can we learn from what you did?
Yeah, I think Bo St. John, she was just doing a talk and she was talking about, she's the new, I believe, CMO of Netflix. She was the CMO for Uber and lots of other big companies. And she says when businesses are sitting at their table, like, can you go into your office or look at your staff, and is your staff homogeneous? Right? Like, does your staff all look like you? That's a problem, right? And when sometimes we say, let's add more diversity or culture into our business, partly what people don't want to say is like, no, we need more black people here. Just say it. You know what I mean? And so it's like, part of it is, how can wellness companies, brands, and authentically say, no, what our business right now is homogeneous, and we need to have, because there are black people who are educated, who are well versed in the roles that they do. So it's not a shortage.
Yeah.
It's about taking an introspective look at your business and saying, do we reflect the real world that we live in?
Right. And also, I think the recent social unrest, I don't know what happened in Canada. I'm sorry, I should have looked, but I live in a city that there is that line of demarcation, Los Angeles. And when the Rodney King riots happened, most of the riots were down in that, in his side of town. So those on the west side, you might say, could go, oh, too bad, that's going on. But the fact that the looting and the protests happened in Beverly Hills and the, really key, I would say, white enclaves, it did make people stop and pay attention. And I say this experience that really makes me sick, but that happened in our neighborhood, which is quite white. I got a text one night and they said, everybody go out at 9 p.m. tonight with your flashlight and shine it in the heavens for 9 minutes for George Floyd. And so I went out with my dogs to see what would happen at 9 o'clock. And I saw 2 clusters of white families doing that. And then at the end, one of the moms said, okay, let's say the name George Floyd really loud. And I thought, well, number one, I'm glad you're doing something. Number two, it's quite passive. But number three, if George Floyd would have walked down the street 3 months ago, you would have at least walked to the other side. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So where is the authenticity meter? Like, I can see through that. What's your advice?
I think part of it is the authenticity meter is like, when you, like, in your community, right? So let's take that and see how we can expand it and broaden it. Part of it is like, Is your friend circle homogeneous? Is your work circle homogeneous? Is your children's experiences homogeneous?
Yeah.
Right? What are you educating your children about Black people? And what are the conversations that you allow yourselves to have around your children around Black people?
Yeah.
Right? Because children are always listening. They're like sponge. And so the next generation, children aren't born racist, but they hear everything that we are saying. And they formulate an idea based on what their family says. And so this is so important because people often wonder, what do I do? It's like when that person sits beside you or comes into the store in your community or walks down the street, say hello. Engage in conversation. Show your children that you are engaging in conversation. Show your children that you don't want to cross the street or you don't want to get too close. I mean, it's COVID, so nobody wants to get too close, but that's the whole, right? But the whole idea about it is like, we really need, white people are often saying like, well, what do I do? And part of it is like, if you know how to love somebody, and you know how to be compassionate towards somebody in your family or your life that looks like you, that tells me that you have the ability to be compassionate with another. And so if you can't do that with somebody who's Black, that means that there's some internal work that has to happen.
Yeah.
Right?
And
so,
that conversation in white fragility is just admit it. We have been influenced by a society that gives the white race a leg up. And I was talking to my girlfriend about it, and I was like, what have I heard? Like somebody even said, I heard John Legend interviewed, and he's like, let's not get silly. If realtors want to do something, they don't have to stop saying master bedroom, but they need to stop not showing homes in certain neighborhoods to Black families. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So also, what is a book, podcast, or TED Talk that you think when you've been working with your clients that is something to go reflect on? What would you recommend?
A book. So sorry, I'm not staring off the space, I'm looking at my bookshelf.
That's okay.
There's a book that I share with my clients. It's called Rock My Soul by Bell Hooks, and it talks about Black self-esteem.
Broaden My Goal?
Rock My Soul by Bell Hooks.
Rock My Soul. Okay.
Rock My Soul by Bell Hooks. A lot of her books support Black identity, Black self-esteem. For a TED Talk, I think we also, in order to help, for the job that I do, whether it's someone dealing with racism or someone dealing with anxiety, I always encourage people to have a meditation practice because it really rewires your brain, right? So for example, meditating for 30 minutes a day for 8 weeks reshapes your brain, especially in the areas that deal with compassion and empathy, which is above your ear, called the temporal parietal junction. So that increases your compassion, empathy, and perspective taking. So often I will tell people to watch Sarah Lazar. She has one of the few mindfulness labs at Harvard University and around the world, and she does research. So her TED Talk is 7 minutes, and I think it's at Cambridge. But if you just search her name, Sarah Lazar, you'll find it. So part of it for me is just really encouraging people to think about, like, am I being compassionate towards that person? Did a bias just happen in my mind? Why don't I think that person is worthy of being respected? I have to think about these things when I look at if I'm white and I'm looking at another person of color, right? What in my mind is creating this space that person's not as worthy as the same things that I have the right and privilege to.
Yeah. It is very amazing. And I will encourage everyone to follow your Instagram page. It made me feel better. I was nervous about our conversation, and I was just seeing those phrases you put up, like stay on purpose, the energy of joy. And then I just love that one, restore Black joy. And, no one has the right to rob someone's joy, right?
Absolutely.
So if we look for ways to give people joy, that's one tip, right?
Absolutely. And joy is a birthright. And in our community and in the Black community, why that hashtag Black Joy is, why you'll see it there, is because we have, because of what's happening and we're grieving, there's a question of like, am I worthy of experiencing joy even though I'm grieving, even though we're going through this movement? Right. And so, for example, I mentioned early the Restore program that I'm a part of, where it's like Black women, Black teachers, giving a safe space for other Black women to just like, sometimes in class, people just sit in there, or like, I get to let down for a moment because I don't feel like I'm judged, which sometimes doesn't happen, unfortunately, in other wellness spaces like we've talked about, right? Like that's the whole reason why I created Mindful Living Barbados, because I went to speak and it was a big stage. And before I went up on stage, the person made me feel like I wasn't supposed to be there.
Jeez.
And I was like, it took me 5 years to get Mindful Living going, but I pursued it because if I kick down the door, then that means other people get to walk through the door. And I have an 8-year-old son.
Yeah.
And so I don't need him going into a space that I've walked in and asking me, Mom, why didn't you try to kick down the door for me?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. I'm telling you. Well, I also see that on August 1st, you're doing a presentation called Peace in a Chaotic World. And how would people find out about that, Randi-Mae?
Yeah, they can go to my website, and on the front page, there's Peace in a Chaotic World. You just click on the Eventbrite. And I will be posting it on my Instagram, hopefully today or tomorrow night.
Yep.
But the whole idea with that series that I'm doing is it's 4 parts or 5 parts. One is exploring the conversation of how do we find peace in this world? So for me, I look at peace as a vibration. So how do we actually allow ourselves to be amongst this chaos and dip into peace? And the other 3 parts are how do we understand what peace is? How do we cultivate it? And how do we actually live with it in our daily life?
I know the answer to this, Randi-Mae, but are your presentations mainly for Black viewers or no?
Sometimes they are, but this presentation is for everybody, because I think collectively, hopefully on the Zoom call, everybody will be able to see each other's faces and understand that we're all worthy of peace.
Yeah. Well, I'm so sorry we have to stop talking. I could go on and on with you, Randi-Mae, but let's do it. Now, remember, we have the Global Wellness Summit podcast. It's the new season is starting in a week or so, and I have a hunch we might see you there. I'm not sure. But thank you for your kindness, your beauty, and your effort, and tell your girlfriend that sorry I took you away for so long.
Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
We'll be in touch. Yeah. Thanks for your wisdom. Keep up the good work.
Okay. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.